Star Trek: Strange New Worlds takes place in the mid-23rd century, and here's how it slots in relative to Star Trek, the original series, and Star Trek: Discovery. Strange New Worlds is the third Star Trek series set in the 23rd century, which is also home to the first two seasons of Star Trek: Discovery, Star Trek, the original series, and the 6 Star Trek movies starring Captain James T. Kirk, William Shatner, and his Starship Enterprise crew. Although Star Trek: Enterprise was the first Star Trek prequel series, it depicted the voyages of Captain Jonathan Archer, Scott Bakula, and the NX-01 in the 22nd century, about 100 years before Strange New Worlds. The origins of Star Trek: Strange New Worlds go all the way back to the first Star Trek pilot, The Cage, which was rejected by NBC in 1964. The Cage introduced Captain Christopher Pike, Jeffrey Hunter, and the crew of the USS Enterprise, including No. 1, Majel Barrett, and Mr. Spock, Leonard Nimoy. 54 years later, Star Trek: Discovery Season 2 reintroduced Captain Pike and his Enterprise. This time, Pike was played by Anson Mount, while Rebecca Romaine embodied No. 1, and Ethan Peck donned Spock's pointy Vulcan ears. Pike, Spock, and No. 1 were so popular, that they received their own spin-off, which became Star Trek: Strange New Worlds. Strange New Worlds is a sequel to Star Trek: Discovery. Pike's Enterprise picks up where Discovery left off. Star Trek: Strange New Worlds is a spin-off and a sequel to Star Trek: Discovery. At the end of Star Trek: Discovery Season 2, Commander Michael Burnham, Sonequa Martin Green, led the USS Discovery on a one-way time jump to the 32nd century to safeguard the galaxy. Star Trek: Discovery Seasons 1 and 2 were set from 2256 to 2258. Star Trek: Strange New Worlds picks up the story several months later in 2259, with Captain Pike leading the Starship Enterprise on a new 5-year mission of exploration. Star Trek: Strange New Worlds is inextricably linked to Star Trek: Discovery, yet now entirely separate from it. In universe, the USS Discovery is officially recorded as destroyed in Starfleet records, and details about its technology like the USS Discovery's Spore Displacement Hub drive, and its battle to save the galaxy from Section 31's Rogue Threat Assessment AI, control, have been redacted. No one in Strange New Worlds' 23rd century is or can be made aware that Captain Michael Burnham and the USS Discovery are thriving in the 32nd century. Strange New Worlds is a prequel to Star Trek, the original series. Eventually, Captain Kirk will take over the Starship Enterprise. Simultaneously, Star Trek: Strange New Worlds is a prequel to Star Trek, the original series. The 5-year mission of Captain Kirk aboard the Starship Enterprise begins in 2265, which means Strange New Worlds takes place about 5 to 6 years before TOS. Strange New Worlds established that many of Captain Kirk's future crew mates are already aboard Pike's Enterprise, such as Ensign Nyota Uhura, Celia Rose Gooding, Nurse Christine Chappell, Jess Bush, and Scotty, Martin Quinn. Even Lieutenant James T. Kirk, Paul Wesley, makes recurring visits in the half-decade before he takes over as captain of the Enterprise from Christopher Pike. In Star Trek: Discovery Season 2, Captain Pike learns that he is destined to be horribly disfigured by delta rays in an accident, and he will spend the rest of his life immobilized in a wheelchair. Star Trek: Strange New Worlds Season 1's finale established that Pike's destiny is ironclad and irreversible without consequences that are both interstellar, galactic war with the Romulans, and personal. Spock is permanently hurt instead of Pike. Star Trek: Strange New Worlds Season 2, Episode 3, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, further revealed the Romulans have dispatched time-traveling agents to alter Earth's past, which explains the changes to Star Trek's timeline. One significant result is that Khan Noonien Singh, Ricardo Montalban, is still a child living in 21st century Toronto instead of his prior history where he ruled 1/4 of Earth's population as an adult during the eugenics wars of the 1990s. However, Star Trek: Strange New Worlds' canonical position between the end of Star Trek: Discovery and the start of Star Trek, the original series can't change. The Star Trek franchise has long captivated audiences with its intricate storytelling, complex characters, and visionary depictions of the future. Among the various series that have graced our screens, Star Trek: Strange New Worlds stands out as a return to the episodic format, focusing on Captain Christopher Pike and the crew of the USS Enterprise. But where does this series fit within the broader timeline of the Star Trek universe, especially in relation to its predecessors, Star Trek, the original series, TOS, and Star Trek: Discovery? The Star Trek timeline, a brief overview. To understand where Strange New Worlds fits, we first need to establish the timelines of the other series. Star Trek is renowned for its nonlinear storytelling and multiple timelines, particularly with the introduction of the Kelvin timeline in the reboot films. However, we will primarily focus on the prime timeline for this exploration. 1. Star Trek: Discovery. The series premiered in 2017, set roughly 10 years before the events of TOS. The first 2 seasons revolve around the crew of the USS Discovery as they navigate the turbulent landscape of the Federation and its many challenges, including the Klingon War and the introduction of the mycelial network as a means of travel. The timeline here is critical because it introduces significant changes to the lore, especially concerning the events leading to the founding of the Federation. 2. Star Trek: The original series, TOS. TOS aired from 1966 to 1969 and is set in the 23rd century. The events take place approximately a decade after the Discovery timeline. Captain James T. Kirk, his crew, and their adventures aboard the USS Enterprise have become iconic, with stories that explore moral and philosophical questions against the backdrop of space exploration. Entering the Strange New Worlds era. Star Trek: Strange New Worlds debuted in 2022, offering fans a fresh take on the Star Trek universe while remaining deeply rooted in its history. The series is set in the early 2260s, placing it between the events of Discovery and TOS. To break it down. Timeline position: Strange New Worlds occurs approximately 2 years after the end of Discovery's second season and roughly a decade before the events of TOS. This positioning is significant as it allows the show to explore the earlier adventures of Captain Pike and his crew before Kirk takes command of the Enterprise. Character connections: The series features familiar characters such as Spock, Number 1, Una Chin Riley, and new faces like Laan Noonien Singh and Dr. Mbenga. This continuity helps bridge the gap between Discovery and TOS, providing a richer understanding of the characters and their development over time. The significance of Captain Pike. Captain Christopher Pike, portrayed by Anson Mount in Discovery and Strange New Worlds, is a pivotal character in the Star Trek lore. His legacy is significant for several reasons.